Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. My name is Paul Klingen, and I am your host. I left a career at Amazon in 2018 to help people live healthier lives. Mindful Muscle is the balance between pushing harder to hit your fitness goals while also being able to slow down. We'll talk all things training, nutrition, and recovery, while also highlighting the importance of mindfulness, slowing down, and taking care of mental health and performance. You'll hear from doctors, authors, athletes, coaches, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in the health and wellness space. And you'll hear from me as an athlete, trainer, nutrition, and personal performance coach as I share my thoughts and experiences that are helping my clients and myself get better each and every day. Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. My name is Paul Klingen. I am your guest, all that good stuff from the intro. And I got to admit, I made the mistake that I talk to clients about all the time and was up late working. Mistake number one was trying to get client check-ins knocked out by 10 o'clock. And then if you are a soccer fan at all or a fan of the world's beautiful game, football, you would know that they're doing some funky stuff over in Europe. Basically what they're trying to do, trying to create a super league. So they take the top 20 most valuable teams in the world and they say, all right, you guys are all going to ditch the leagues that you've been in for 100 plus years and you're going to form a super league and we're going to be billionaires. We're already billionaires, but we're become even more rich because we're going to get a ton of TV revenue. These games are going to draw a lot of eyeballs, a lot of money. And so I'm reading this and myself personally, this is getting to know me kind of deep. I'm a Chelsea fan. Chelsea FC Blues. I remember when Drogba put in that header against Bayern Munich, and that was just the peak of fandom for me. Believe it or not, like I've never even been to London, but that was just so amazing for me to watch Chelsea make that run. They had no business winning that Champions League. I want to say it was 2008. I don't know. It was the year they didn't even make the final four spots. Torres was terrible. Anyway, and Chelsea stood up. They were one of the first English teams. This is where I'm getting. They were one of the first English teams to be like, hey, we're not joining the Super League. The fans have spoken. This is a bad idea. Like, we're chasing money and not listening to people. And I was just so relieved as I was reading that. But it had me drawn in. Next thing I know, it's 11:30, and I've been a wreck all day. Super tired. So all that's to say, get your sleep, get to bed, and make sure that you got all the energy you need for the next day. I actually had a client. She brought me a coffee. She was like, man, you look rough. And I was like, I'm struggling a little bit. So she got me a coffee. Things have been up and up ever since then. But anyway, just always like to start with like a little story, a little lesson on things that I'm going through. There's actually a few lessons. We're going to do a Q&A today, as mentioned in the intro or in the title of the podcast. But this is actually the 2-year anniversary that I got rear-ended by a trolley. I'll probably do a podcast on the things I learned just in body awareness, spine, breathing, and do a little bit of education on that so you guys can learn from that lesson that I had where I was basically like bedridden for a week and in a lot of pain for a long time. Wasn't able to work out. So 2-year anniversary of that. But it's also the 1-year anniversary of me working with a therapist. And that's what I'm going to say for the end of the podcast. You'll be able to hear the lessons that I've pulled out of that, the things I've learned about myself and how that's actually helped me not only as a person in reaching my fitness goals, but it's helped me kind of look at things through a new lens on how, and this is big caveat, I am not a therapist, but this has helped me start to ask better questions with clients on how they can make some nutritional decisions or, just lifestyle decisions in general that are better suited to what their conscious self would want to do, right? Rather than these unconscious thoughts. But first, we're going to start with some of the questions that clients, people in the Facebook community, people on social media have asked over the course of the week. And so we're going to go right down the line. We got Stacy. One of the questions she had, how do I know if I'm lifting/pushing myself enough at the gym by myself? And this is a really big one. People go to the gym, they're lifting, but how much weight should they lift? And people want to ask the question, how much weight should I lift? When in reality, you should be trying to measure, all right, how much effort is going into it? And there's a couple different ways you can look at this. One, RPE, rate of perceived exertion. That is going to be something that as you get more advanced and familiar with lifts, you'll be able to say like, okay, that was a 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 being that was max effort. 5 being like that was super easy. 8, 9, 10. All right, I had maybe 2 reps in the tank. I had 1 rep in the tank, or maybe I could do like 5 more pounds. The other way you can do is flip this, how many reps in reserve? So failure would be 0 reps in reserve. So you do push-ups and then you basically do a face plant. That is 0 reps in reserve. So 1 rep in reserve would be being able to say like, all right, I had 1 more rep in the tank before I would have failed. 2 reps in reserve, all right, 2, obviously 3. And in terms of building muscle and overall strength, you really want to make sure that your working sets, your hard sets, are at least a 7 RPE or 3 reps in reserve or more. Now, you don't want to go to failure all the time because it's super taxing on the body, central nervous system. It's going to be really hard to recover if every single time you go to the gym and every single lift is a max effort lift. I do think that beginner lifters or novice lifters would benefit from pushing themselves to failure a little bit more, because the reality is they just don't know what failure is. A lot of us have a governor on our mind that is saying, oh, I can't push any further. But in reality, if you've got a picture like Ryan Gosling or my favorite Candace Swanpole, they're standing next to you and they're cheering you on. They're like, get that last rep. You'd find 2-3 more reps in the tank. Just be real with yourself. Like, if you had someone next to you motivating the crap out of you, you're going to get more out of yourself. And that's how you start to find out, okay, this is what I'm capable of. And so coming back around to that question, how do I know if I'm lifting, pushing myself enough at the gym? When I'm programming for a client, I'm saying, all right, this first week, I want you to be in maybe 3 reps in reserve, or I want you to be at a 7 RPE. Then the next week, you're trying to add on 5 pounds, or you're trying to add 1 or 2 more reps. And so then you're saying, okay, I'm at an 8 RPE or a 2 rep in reserve. Then you get to 9. Then that max week where we're pushing ourselves, we are hitting a 10 and maybe a big lift or a specific lift. We're trying to get to that like higher intensity level. But then you're going to have a deload week where the next week's a little bit lighter and you're able to recover from that. And so when you look at it, it's like stair 1, stair 2, stair 3, stair 4 is max. We'll pull you back down to stair 2. Then we're at 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull down to stair 3. If you can visualize that, it's basically like picture Amazon stock over the last 10 years. That's what we're doing in terms of pushing yourself. So how do you know if you're pushing yourself? Do a set of failure, and then you're able to say, okay, I want to be 1 or 2 steps from that. And you can think, like, another analogy for this is, if your job is too easy, you're not going to grow. If your job is too hard, it's going to overstress you. You're also not going to grow. It's got to be the right amount of tough in order for you to progress. But in order for you to know what that is, you got to fail a little bit. You got to know, like, all right, this is where I am, falling short. And then right before that, right up to that edge of that cliff, that's that threshold of, all right, I'm on the edge. I'm living. I'm pushing myself. I'm growing. There's a lot of analogies with lifting and with life, but coming back, wrapping this one up, how do you know if you're lifting, pushing yourself at the gym? Take a set that takes you within, let's say, 5 reps to failure, and then work backwards from that. There's a lot of calculators that can help you estimate 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 rep, 4 rep, 5 rep, 8 rep maxes based off of what you do in that AMRAP method. But that's a route I would go there, whether we're working together or you're just listening. Next question. This one came in from May. She's wondering, should I go low fat or should I go no fat with my cottage cheese? So if you follow me on social media, you should, Paul_Klingen. If you don't, you're missing out. But one of the things I post a lot about is my infatuation with cottage cheese and tapatio. So I'll have that, not a ton, just like a serving a day. And if I don't buy it, maybe I miss 3 or 4 days, but helps me get a good amount of protein in. It's really flavorful. I love the tapatio. But one of the things that she was asking is, hey, should I get 4%? I think it was 1.5 or no fat. And typically what I usually recommend for them, this is a broad generalization, but with dairy products, you're primarily getting saturated fat with that fat. And studies have shown that can lead to heart disease. Depending on how young you are, how much saturated fat you're having, or whether you're obese, overweight, or like your health, you have obviously a higher or lower degree to that risk. So don't let that scare you, like, oh, I can't have saturated fat. A lot of red meat's going to have saturated fat. But we're also being cognizant of, all right, if I'm going to have something that is 80 calories versus 120 calories, I'm eating the cottage cheese for the protein content. I don't necessarily need that fat, and that saturated fat is going to push me up to a higher number than I'd want. A rule of thumb is that you want to have no more than 20 grams of saturated fat per day for a 2,000 calorie diet. And so I was looking at my cottage cheese. I think it gave me like 3 or 4 or 5. It's kind of broad, but in that 3, 4, I think it was 3 grams for just that one serving. So now all of a sudden I'm having 10, 20, 30% of my daily intake just in that little snack. So something to be cognizant of there. I think the bigger problem is that when you have these dairy products, and especially higher fat dairy products, they're usually associated with things that they are on top of. So like pizza or a burger, I'd say that's something that's going to be a little bit bigger of a problem if you're just having it isolated. Really try and make sure that it is a good source, that it is grass-fed, or it is organic, or something that is going to be basically a higher quality source of, and this is also just looking at like meat, but also the dairy that you're getting. So food quality and source is going to be important there. But then also keep in mind too, fats aren't bad. You just want to make sure you're having the right fats. Dietary fats are essential to give your body energy, support cell growth, and they help protect your organs and keep your body warm. So then you're also looking at fats that are going to help absorb specific micronutrients, so like fat-soluble vitamins, and then help produce hormones in the body. So fats are important. I wouldn't sweat the details, but if you are trying to optimize, go as low fat as possible. I always get 0% Fage Greek yogurt for this reason. I'll always try and get 1.5. This is just at the Whole Foods I go to, 1.5 Alpenrose cottage cheese. So just say, all right, I want to get as low fat as possible, and then get better fats from other sources. Next question. This one's coming in from Adam. Best snacks for energy. So I had a couple of thoughts with this one, but I wanted to go the route of, all right, blood sugar's dipping, starting to feel a little slow, lethargic. Let's boost energy up. And I'm going to give you 5 that you can utilize. So 1, bananas. I love bananas. Anytime I'm about to go do a workout, I'm getting in bananas, you're getting 30 grams of protein, or not protein, you're getting 30 grams of carbs. So you're going to see a big bump in blood sugar right away. They're also high in potassium, high in magnesium. Magnesium is really important for regulating muscle, nerve function, blood sugar levels, blood pressure. Potassium also retains fluid and balances out muscle contractions as well. So it's something that's going to be really helpful going into a training session. Give yourself an hour to digest it, but you'll see some energy bumps there. Watermelon. I love watermelon. It's a super refreshing snack, and it can be done in the middle of a workout, after a workout. It's also 90% water, so it's going to help with hydration, and it's going to contain some useful electrolytes, but it's also going to provide solid sugar hit, boost energy there. It's going to have some citrulline, which is actually going to help with blood flow during performance. So you'll be able to get a little bit of a better pump as well. And then coming down the line, berries. Berries. Blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, right? So they're going to be rich in antioxidants, which is going to help athletes reduce inflammation and soreness in your muscles. Berries are also a natural source of sugar. If you're picking up on a theme here, lots of natural sources of sugar, rather than saying, hey, you want more energy? Have Skittles. No, it's have something that's going to boost your blood sugar, but not just like crazy sugar. Like we're not having a warhead. That's crazy. Anyway, coming back to berries, natural source of sugar, high in fiber. They're also just super delicious and can pair really well with stuff. Dates, also high in fiber, potassium, magnesium. Anytime you have like an energy bar or ice cream and they're like, oh, it's naturally flavored, it's a little bit healthier, it's usually dates that are providing that sweetness. So you can just pop in a couple dates, really similar to like a banana, where you're able to have that an hour right before a workout, boom, energy's bumped up. And keep in mind, I'm talking about workouts here, but this could be 2 o'clock and you're feeling super drained. So these could be really good snacks to have versus, and some of the things you'll see maybe online, it'll say like, hey, oh, have trail mix, or oh, have these nuts. Typically, I like to stay away from that because fats are just going to be really easy to overeat. All of a sudden, you have 2 pounds of almonds, and you're like, oh, wow, like I didn't even mean to do that. 700 calories. Having the berries and the fruit is just sweet. You get the water elements to it, less salt. This is my perspective on that. You can definitely have nuts, but you just got to be a lot more cognizant of portion size. And then last but not least, this one's a little niche, but it brought me back to when I used to go to a bike shop, Velafort bars. So they're a performance-based energy bar without artificial sweeteners that might mess with your gut. They're primarily dried fruit. They do have a little bit of nuts in them, so they are a little bit higher. I think they were like 400 calories for this little bar. But all the guys that were long-distance endurance bikers swore by them, and it's much better than just throwing in like a honey goo. I felt as running a marathon, training for a marathon, running several marathons actually, I would do the goo route, and I wish I would have had these bars because they are very flavorful. I've had them several times at, it's called Rafa. These guys who are endurance bikers that would bike all over the world, they swore by them. And I definitely recommend them. They got dates, different flavors, but super flavorful, really good energy resources. So that's Velafort, Velaforte, bars, spelled as bars. Next question is coming from Steven. He was wondering, what are some supplements that I should be adding in? And I personally don't take a ton of supplements. Try and get them all from a really healthy, whole foods rich diet. But there are definitely some ones that I do supplement with. And keep in mind, supplement is meant to supplement the diet, not fill in entire holes in your diet. Make sure that you're cleaning up your diet before you're worrying about the 1%. Get the big fish, then get the little smaller ones. And if you are deficient on something, and you work with a professional, a doctor, and you're able to get a blood test, and then you see, oh, I am deficient in this, my body naturally doesn't produce this like it should, then yeah, definitely add in a supplement. In terms of ones that I'll generally recommend for almost everyone that I'm working with, fish oil, your omega-3 fatty acids. Typically, we'll prescribe 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams, which is about 5 to 6 grams of fat, depending on the weight. And then once you get into that rhythm, 2 to 3 weeks, and we get you eating maybe a little bit more fish, then we're going to lower that down 3 to 4 milligrams just to maintain. It's really important to make sure and get an organic source. If you've watched Seaspiracy, I think I talked about that a few podcasts ago. But if you're getting farmed fish oils, it's going to be contaminated with a ton of stuff. You don't even want to know what's in it, pesticides, chemicals, and just like the gross amount of stuff that they do to fatten up these fish. Next, we're looking at creatine, citrulline. I have those as supplements in my pre-workout that I'll use through Vital Performance. I get like a blueberry flavor. But the creatine is going to help athletes. So really, if you're training, this is definitely something to add in. It's going to help you perform more work, greater power, velocity, while simultaneously reduce the amount of effort expended. And just from a aesthetic, visual standpoint, you're going to get a massive pump with this because this is helping to increase circulation and increase blood flow while you're training. Citrulline is also going to help with that. It increases nitric oxide synthesis. It's a non-essential amino acid found primarily in watermelon. We're bringing it back to watermelon from those energy snacks. It's also found in watermelon, cucumbers, and other melons. And if you're also adding arginine as a supplement, citrulline is usually found to be a little bit more effective as it's a precursor to arginine. So you can kind of skirt on that arginine. And then last but not least, some sort of caffeine with that pre-workout, help rev up that nervous system, get you in that sympathetic, ready to fight a dragon or, lift a barbell up and perform really well. Vitamin D, super important for majority of people, especially with COVID. We've all been locked in. We're not outside. We're not getting the sun that we need. So if you are sun deficient in any capacity, I'd say anyone outside of, a fisherman in the Bahamas is probably looking at needing a little bit of vitamin D. So supplement with that. And then a multivitamin, basically making sure that, and this is, again, going to be a little bit specific to people that are training hard or lower levels of body fat, but water, fat-soluble vitamins are typically going to be deficient or more likely to be found deficient with people with lower fat because you don't have as much fat to store soluble vitamins. So you're looking at A, D, E, and K for fat-soluble vitamins, and then water-soluble vitamins. You're working out, you're sweating, you're peeing, you're drinking all that water. You're going to be sweating out and losing a lot of vitamin C and all the vitamin Bs. So having a multivitamin that helps you get some of that is going to be helpful. So that's just a recap. We're looking at for supplements, fish oil, pre-workout, creatine, citrulline, caffeine, vitamin D, and then a multivitamin to get your fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins. Now, if you're still listening, obviously I talked about in the very beginning of the podcast that it's been a year since I started working with a therapist, and I think a year ago is when COVID was at like peak COVID. We were all locked in. Didn't really know like data, like what was going to happen. Everyone was really stressed out, really worried. And for me, it was kind of tough just because I take so much joy and value out of producing. And by producing, I mean working and helping people. And so when that was cut out away from me, I was like, what is the point of all this? Like, why am I like, what, like, essentially I was saying I don't have a purpose that I'm fulfilling. And so I was just kind of bummed. Not what is the point of all this? I was like, that was a little dark. It wasn't that dark. And really, what I want to talk about with this is just how important it is to have a way to poke holes in your potato. If you've ever made a baked potato, you poke holes in it before you put it in the oven. That oven increases heat. That is increasing, in a way you can think about it as like increasing stress. So when we increase stress in our lives, it is going to reveal different things that, under low stress situations, maybe don't come up. Under high stress situations, they can tend to bubble up and explode. And maybe not a big explosion, but it can be kind of that self-sabotaging thing that you do, or that really bad habit that you have. And then there are times where you stuff an emotion so far deep, and then you get to a situation to where you can't hold it anymore, and then you do explode. That's why I say you got to poke holes in your potato. So for me, when I get to talk to my therapist, or even when I'm talking to a coach, I'm able to poke holes in the different thoughts that I have. And so I'm just like, oh, decompressing that thought, boom, getting rid of that thing that was, anytime you break up with someone or you share a secret, it feels so good to get that off your chest. That's a lot of what we're looking at here. But one of the things I quickly started to work on and was excited to work on was like, man, I have such a tendency to just binge. Like, you put 2 Chipotle burritos in front of me, gone in 2 seconds. And, for I think I'm 6 foot, anywhere from 180 to 200 pound guy, like, yeah, I eat a lot. That's pretty normal. But what we started to see was, oh, wow, there are tendencies for me to, in social situations, stick around the cheese plate, or always need a drink, or have a little bit more food than necessary. And, growing up in a household with 3 siblings, 6 people in the family, it was very much this like, all right, as soon as that plate hits the table, it's like everyone best man for themselves. You're going and getting your food. And so there's elements of that where it's like, I needed to get to a point to where I could be aware and conscious that, wow, I'm going to have another opportunity to have that really good brie cheese. I'm going to have another opportunity to have pizza. I don't need to eat it all now because I'm not going to go 3 months without food. Like, there's going to be food right down the street 10 hours later. So that was a big one. But at a little bit of a deeper level was just some social anxiety, where if I was in a social situation, and typically I'm pretty social, like this is coming up on podcast 100. I've taught tons of different classes. I love giving presentations. I love speaking on stage, or not on stage. I haven't really been on stage, but just like public speaking. There are still elements where I'll struggle in social situations because I'm just like, oh, how am I being perceived? And how I cope with that I've learned is I will go and eat. So if I'm at maybe a wedding, I'm around that snack bar or dinner bar or whatever bar, and that's something that helps me feel a little bit more safe, where it's like, all right, I've got this. I've got something in my hand. I've got something that I'm doing. I'm not just like that weird, awkward person standing in the corner. I'm that weird, awkward person with a drink looking totally normal. And so as I get to know this, I think it's really important to kind of weave this thread through everything. So much of what we do nutritionally and habit-wise is subconscious, and it comes from stuff that we've done from age 5. So I was talking about Tapatio earlier. I love Tapatio. I think part of the reason why I love Tapatio is some of my best memories, and this is also kind of crazy. I would watch 24, one of my favorite shows, and I would have a family-sized bag of Tapatio Doritos, Arizona green tea, and I would eat that in that hour watching 24. And so I remember having a really good time with this food, and so I've got this good memory that I associate with a good time and a relaxing time anytime I have Tapatio. So maybe it's not Tapatio for you, but maybe it's a bowl of cereal. Maybe it's a bag of chips. Whatever that childhood food that you had that you associate with a really good memory of watching cartoons, of family time, of relaxing, right? People get that beer and they're just like, oh man, like last time I had this beer, it was such a good time. Now you're going to associate that Corona with that really good time in Mexico because that's how your brain's wired. But what's happening is when you are super stressed, bringing it back around to poking holes in the potato, when you're super stressed, you want to bring yourself back to a homeostasis, very balanced, I want to say stressful environment, but basically you're just trying to down-regulate your nervous system and not get and be so fight or flight and be so like anxious. And so that food's going to help you do that. And so as I'm doing all this and learning, I'm like, wow, the more aware I can be in these situations where I'm doing something subconsciously, the more I'm able to then consciously say, hey, this is something that I can predict that is going to happen, or consciously be able to say, all right, I am doing this right now. I can step away. I don't need to be by the cheese plate. I don't need to be having a third or fourth or fifth or sixth slice of pizza. I can essentially bring myself back to a more aware state and be able to say, all right, I'm going to consciously say no, because I actually know consciously I don't want that, but it's just a coping mechanism to feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more safe in that. And so, we talk a lot about in this Q&A different nutrition tips or training tips. This is where I'm a big believer in taking time to slow down and get aware of some deeper rooted things, and why a specific meal plan or a recipe book, and don't get me wrong, these are things that I have for people to help as resources or workout plans. Until you get to the root of what is causing you to trip up, you can't just keep tripping over that with a plan at the surface level. Like, you got to pull on that root and pull to the very bottom of it and ask questions and be like, oh, wow, this is the source of that thing that's tripping me up. And then until you go and address that, you're going to struggle with it. And it's not to say that I'm just never going to be anxious again, or that I'm never going to be, whoa, like, what's going on in this social environment? But now I'm aware of it. And I can honestly say that between working with a therapist, working with a nutrition coach, tracking for the last year has really helped me be more aware. I'm aware of so many decisions I make because I'm putting it into my phone every single time. I'm aware of how I feel the next day because I have something to go and look at it. I'm aware every time I'm in a social situation because now it's at the forefront of my conscious, and I'm able to use the rational part of my brain and say, all right, here's what I would like to do ideally with my executive functioning part of the brain. Anyway, just kind of repeating myself. But I think it's important. And to tie it all together, the whole thing of working with a therapist, this isn't me getting on and saying, hey, you need to work with a therapist, that'll fix your problems. Some people would really benefit from that. Some people would really benefit from just having a coach and creating more awareness. But at the core of all of it is being more aware and being okay slowing down and pulling on that route, because it can be kind of scary as to like, oh, now I got to go and visit something that was not as fun for me, that is the cause of this, hurdle, obstacle that I'm trying to work around. But at the core of it all is awareness. And as you slow down, you get more aware. And whether you're seeing a therapist, you're seeing a coach, I feel goofy saying this, but it's so true. It's not a sign of weakness. I'm literally doing these things so that I can be a better version of me. And I would definitely say that that's the case. I've gone from, in the last year, not being aware of these. Now I'm aware of them. Now I'm much better socially. Now I'm much better in social environments. Now I'm better with drinking and just stopping at 2 or 3, or maybe I have 4 or 5, and I'm going to be better as a fitness person. Like, I'm trying to right now lean out for a photo shoot. It's become so much easier because binging isn't something that I'm running into because of all this work that I've done. So again, think of it as more you're doing these things to level up and grow rather than it's fixing something that is broken about you. It's a tool. Same way as you hire a physical therapist to get your knee working right so that you can go run a marathon at your peak time. You work with someone to work on the noggin so that you're thinking as optimally as possible, and then you go have like the best thought process, the best mindset possible. So that wraps up the Q&A. That wraps up the lessons that I've learned in the last year working with a therapist, and we'll wrap up the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star rating and review. Subscribe if you enjoy this podcast, this model where we interview someone. We have a podcast Q&A, and I answer questions. If you're like, hey, man, I want my question answered, shoot me a DM. I'll do Q&As all the time on social media. You can shoot me an email, paul@downdogathletics.com. Join the Facebook group, and you can ask questions within that as well. So a lot of different opportunities to get your questions answered. More than happy to help. And then one last little bit. If you're like, hey, I want to work together as a nutrition coach or with a nutrition coach or a training coach, we just hired Logan. He's our new trainer. We got a bunch of different people that can help support you. So if you're like, oh, man, I want to get my fitness under control, I want to get my fitness lifestyle dialed in, reach out. More than happy to talk about what that strategy would look like and see if you're a good fit. Other than that, though, catch you guys next week with an awesome guest for the Mindful Muscle Podcast.